episodes one day before Thanksgiving, which is the final Thursday, or it's the fourth Thursday, right? Because the final Thursday would be the 30th. So either tomorrow is Thanksgiving or the 30th. Either way, today is Wednesday, November 22nd, 2017. So November 22nd. Isn't that, when did JFK get killed? Wasn't it around that time? I know that Tony Grubshover, my uncle, got into a car accident about this time, 1973. And JFK got killed either the 23rd or the 22nd in 63. But this has nothing to do with JFK or Tony Grubshover, though when you say their names to the earth, they're still alive. So Tony Grubshover, R.I.P. JFK, R.I.P. The Thames River in Connecticut used to be called the Pequot River. Used to be called the Pequot River. They did the same thing with the Cumberland River. It used to be the Shawnee River. The Shawnee used to live over by that river. Hey, the Shawnee over by that river. Oh, yeah, the Shawnee River. That's how names get formed. There was a reason. There's a purpose. There's a historical purpose for names of rivers. So in Connecticut, there's a river called the Thames. And no, I know what you're thinking. The River Thames, not the River Styx, but the River Thames in London. There is the Thames River, but they call it the River Thames. So I guess that distinguishes it, right? So you got the Thames River in Connecticut versus the River Thames. But really, I don't even like calling it the Thames River. It's the Pequot River. It's the fucking Pequot River. When did it change to the Thames? When did it change? It was originally known as the Pequot River because the Pequot lived there. That's how they defined. What makes you a Pequot? We live by the Pequot River. It said there's other names for the river. It is Frisius, Great River of Pequot, Little Fresh, Mohegan, New London, and Pequod with a D. The town was officially named New London, and the estuary river was renamed Thames to match. Okay. So the Thames River was called the Thames because it was right next to New London. And so that's where the Thames, so it all has to do with fucking England and London and all this, Cumberland, right? That's London and England. And so, Cumberland, so the Shawnee people lived there for 14,000 years, you know, give or take a couple thousand. And it's been known as the Shawnee River. Then all of a sudden, some white guy goes walking around Kentucky. I don't think it was Filson, but it was Christopher Gist, maybe. And he just goes around Thomas Walker. It's probably Thomas Walker. Fucking prick. So Thomas Walker goes around walking to Kentucky, and he looks at the Shawnee River and says, nope, it's the Cumberland River from now on. The butcher, he fucking killed all those Scotch people. It's the Duke of Cumberland. So it's a titled thing in a different area. It's a land mass in a different spot. So why not just name it its own thing? It already had its own unique name to begin with, and now it's like, well, is it the Shawnee River or the Cumberland River? Apparently, fucking English, man. So, yeah, the Thames River used to be called the Pequot River. And if you don't know shit about Sassacus, if you don't know shit about the Pequot, then you don't know shit about Thanksgiving. So, Gang Stephen, the Pilgrim and Indians, I like that as a title, Pilgrim and Indian Stories, the stories of the Pilgrims and the Indians. Because Thanksgiving, the 1621, that little dinner that we're all celebrating, it tells just a tiny bit of the story. It very much whitewashes the entire history. 10 to 100 million Native Americans were running around the Americas, and now they're not. Now they're nowhere to be found. Now they're like in reservations, and they only make up 1%. They used to be 100% of the population. And they're here for 14,000 years, so they have a long, you know, they have a stake. They got a claim. What, the conquest claim? Well, we conquered you, you know. We used force and violence and subdued an entire nation, you know. And we got away with it, so sorry. What? Might makes right. I'd like to share you a Bible quote. I will make them eat the flesh of their own sons and the flesh of their daughters, and they will eat one another's flesh in the siege and in the distress with which their enemies and those who seek their life will distress them. Jeremiah 19:9. David Cassidy died today or yesterday. So, boom, 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 boom. I'm sleeping and right in the middle of a good dream. Something keeps knocking at my brain. Before I go insane, I hold my pillow to my head and scream out the words I dread. I think I love you. I think I love you. So, R.I.P. David Cassidy, R.I.P. Sassacus, R.I.P. Pequot, R.I.P. Tony Gripshover, R.I.P. JFK, R.I.P. Shawnee River, R.I.P. Pequot River. So let's just get through this. Isn't that always a good, nice, inspiring? When a teacher gets it, all right, let's just get through this. I got all this data I just want to stuff into your brain, so let's just get through it, okay? I'm not inspired, though. I say I want to leave. I want to. It feels like you're just going to, just like with a plunger, just going to jam all this data into your brain. So 1621, William Bradford became the governor of Plymouth after the first governor died. So the first governor of Plymouth Plantation, these are your pilgrims, William Bradford, Plymouth, Connecticut, I think. Right? So 1621, he becomes the governor of Plymouth. So congratulations to William Bradford. Then 1631, 10 years later, John Winthrop, who is going to die 1649, so in only 18 years. He becomes the first elected official in America. Oh my God, John Winthrop. Right, when he's a city on the hill man, John Winthrop, the first elected official, the first democratically elected, the people chose John Winthrop to lead. And he was the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, or the Massachusetts Bay Company, the MBC. So the head of the MBC, the governor, the elected governor, the first elected governor, the first elected official in all of America. If you ignore the Native Americans, the Iroquois, and all the... But in terms of white people, 1631, John Winthrop becomes the first elected official. Then, 2 years later, the English Puritan settlements at Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay colonies, they began to expand into the rich Connecticut River Valley, towards the Pequot River, towards the River Thames, or the Thames River, by New London. Right, so 1621, William Bradford becomes the governor of Plymouth after the first governor dies. 1631, John Winthrop becomes the first elected official in America. 1633, the Puritans, and actually I heard that they're not Puritans, but separatists. And then English, they're British, so they're English-speaking. They're British, but they're not American. America isn't formed until George Washington, 1789. So this is 1633. This is, 50 or so years, 79, 40 years. So it's 140 years before America even begins. So this is the British colonies. These are the invaders. And they weren't looking for religious freedom. They wanted a theocracy. They wanted to limit religious freedom. They didn't want their children to have freedom because they were extremes. That's why they're called Puritans, or they're nicknamed the Puritans. And they weren't called the Pilgrims either. They were pioneers. We call them Pilgrims today, because they were the first, colonists, the first whites that established some sort of civilization, some kind of settlement that kept on going, that existed, because lots of folks tried to establish colonies. Roanoke, the lost colony of Roanoke. You also had Swedish and the Dutch and the French and the Spanish. So you had all these competing countries too, and then they're always at war. So at any moment, at any time, you know, the different forts and colonies could just go to war with each other. So here in Connecticut and Massachusetts, the Dutch were close by. So it was the Dutch, and it was the Pequot, and there was Native Americans, and you had Plymouth, you had Massachusetts Bay Colony, and I think you had Connecticut Bay Colony, right? So you have the Dutch had established a trading post called the House of Good Hope at present-day Hartford, Connecticut, which I think is the capital of Connecticut. 1634. The Dutch traded with the Nipmuc and the Metabasic and the Pequot. So 1634, this is before 1637, the year of the table knife. 1637, the year of the table knife, when they invented a table knife. So you want to talk about savages. These motherfuckers weren't even using table knives. None of them were. The Dutch were savages. The damned British were savages. Didn't even use a table knife. How they cut their fucking, you know, not their meat, but like the butter. How they, you know, use a sharp knife, like use a sword. What a bunch of fucking savages. Just to give you an idea, it's also before the Enlightenment. So it's not just before America, it's also before the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment happened 1650, says some, 1700, says others. So the 1600s, their population was estimated to be 2,200 individuals, the Pequot, that is. Because if you don't know the Pequot, if you don't know Sassacus, then you don't know shit about Thanksgiving. You don't know shit about Thanksgiving. So, and probably everything that you know about Thanksgiving is wrong, too. I mean, you didn't read the original documents. You didn't read the original sources. Shut up. You're just repeating what everybody else. You're just going along with the flow. So, the Sassacus is the last of the Pequot, like last of the Mohicans. The Mohicans are actually the enemies in this story. They are against Sassacus and the Pequot just because they want to be fucking buddies with John Mason and John Underhill. Pequot either means the destroyers or the swamp people or people of the water that is shallow. So the people in the shallow water, which I kind of like that. The people in the shallow water, that's like a Native American thing, right? Dragging canoe, one who drags a canoe. Geronimo is yawning Indian. Or so the people of the water that is shallow. People of the shallow water. Pequot. People of the shallow water, the Pequot River. Come on. And it says here, the Pequot is any member of a group of Algonquin-speaking, that's their language group, Algonquin-speaking North American Indians who lived in the Thames Valley in what is now Connecticut, U.S. Their subsistence was based on the cultivation of corn, maize, right, hunting and fishing. So hunting, fishing, corn, they're civilized, right? God, they have civilization. This is the agricultural revolution has already hit the Pequot. And there was a lot of stuff, there was a lot of plants that were indigenous to the United States. And so actually let's go right into that. The Pequot, when it comes to John Winthrop and where John Winthrop and Underhill and Jacob Ellikins, where all the Pilgrims came from, the Pilgrims didn't have any pineapples. They didn't have any vanilla or chocolate or pumpkins or tomatoes or potatoes or sweet potatoes or corn or avocado or chili peppers, hot peppers, green bell peppers. They didn't have none of that. So the Pequot, I think they agriculturally were more advanced than the Europeans. And they also had, you know, there was a big cultural, that's the significance, the historical significance of Columbus, was that these two worlds collided. But to assume that the natives were completely, you know, without technology or advancement, that's not the case. And in some respects, they're superior. Their agricultural techniques were superior, and they also had all these wild rice, passion fruit, peanuts. They didn't know about peanuts, you know. They didn't know about potatoes and a tomato. Sweet potatoes was in South America, so I heard it didn't come up to North America yet. But it was in the Americas, sweet potatoes were. It wasn't in Europe. Papaya, excuse me, papaya, bean, squash, zucchini, berries, nuts, acorns, chia. sunflowers, maple, so I guess maple trees, maple syrup, wild rice, passion fruit, which I'm not for sure, but it's got a good name, peanut, pineapple. Columbus found the pineapple, I think in what, Guadalupe. There's also turkey, white-tailed deer, buffalo, rabbit, guinea pig. So these were things that were indigenous to this continent. So John Winthrop never saw, him and his people never saw turkey. They didn't know what a white-tailed deer was, or a buffalo, or a rabbit, or a guinea pig, or a pineapple. Chocolate, the seeds of the cacao tree. Is that what it is? Vanilla, wherever vanilla comes from. So both vanilla and chocolate. We should have racial harmony here. Both vanilla and chocolate are indigenous to the Americas. And so I think, actually, that would be a good celebration to eat the indigenous stuff, to recognize that the plants, there were plants that were here in the Americas first, and to just, take them and devour their fruits for ourselves so they can't reproduce. Wait a second. No, I don't want cultural genocide. I think it's okay. Eat some corn. Go eat some corn on the cob. Go buy some canned corn and be like, you know what? Corn was discovered here in America. We didn't even have corn. Without corn, where would we have all the high fructose corn syrup? Soft drinks. Where would we sweeten our soft drinks? That's our sugar for today. It's corn. We get it from corn. Chili peppers, hot peppers, spicy meatballs. Avocados, people like them. Pumpkins, pumpkin pie, pumpkin spice. What would we do without pumpkins? And a lot of these things are staples. Corn, potato, I don't know, tomatoes, peppers. They're just rice, wild rice. But definitely corn and potatoes. Those are staples. Those are like, people say, we need our potatoes, we need our rice. We need our corn. So, the way to celebrate, I think a good way to celebrate Thanksgiving would be to try to pick out those specific things and eat them. I don't think that we should prevent them. If anything, maybe to not have cultural genocide, we should plant them. Let's plant some pineapples. Let's plant, I think, pecan trees. Oh my God, I can't believe I didn't put pecans. I'm so glad I have the mind that I have. So pecans, that's also, I believe it's indigenous. There's a ton of pecan trees, and they use it for currency. So they talking about wampum. The wampum thing just sounds like it's just completely different. It was like Native Americans and the whites thought that the other one thought wampum had value, and so they just used wampum as currency, even though, no, I don't know. So, yeah. We can plant these things, right? But don't plant any apple trees, and don't eat any apples, don't eat any oranges, don't eat any watermelon, don't eat any cantaloupe. I'm not for sure where they came from, but until they're verified to be indigenous, if you eat a fucking apple on Thanksgiving Day, then you hate America. You're a racist, homophobic bigot, and you hate America, and you hate puppies and kittens. You're a piece of shit is what I'm saying. If you eat an apple on Thanksgiving, you're a piece of shit. I don't want to, go overboard. I don't want to speak a bunch of rhetoric, But Captain John Stone, what a piece of shit. So in 1600s, there was 2,200 Pequot. There were 2,200 individuals that would have been called the Pequot. Algonquin-speaking North American Indians who lived in the Thames River Valley, the Pequot River Valley, in what is now Connecticut. That's how it's spelled. So, in Connecticut, you have the Thames River, which really is the Pequot River, let's be honest. And the Dutch had established a trading post there called the House of Good Hope at present-day Hartford. So come to the House of Good Hope. This is like a factory or trading post. People come and, goods and, I guess, civilization, right? I don't know where the House of Good Hope, the Dutch, they're not here today. So apparently, the English killed all the Dutch. But before the English killed all the Dutch, they were out and about, and they were trading with the Nipmuc and the Matabasic and the Pequot. So the Dutch and the English. They're both trading. They're out and about, civilization, discovering new worlds. It's corporations, right? So they're just trying to make money, trying to find some pelts, beaver pelts. So the greedy-ass fucking Dutch. I have some, well, the Dutch is right there by Germany. The Dutch is right there by Germany. And then the, what was that big, the Hanseatic League? So the Dutch have been doing, you know, maritime sort of naval trade. They've been doing this shit for a long time. But Jacob Elkins, this piece of shit, the trader for the Dutch West India Company, and he's a trader, one who trades, but he's also a traitor in terms of, you know, humanity. I mean, that very much could be what this corporation wanted to be done. So Jacob Elkins, he's the resident trader, so I guess he's the king. He's the CEO of the Dutch West India Company, the corporation, right? The Dutch West India Corporation is being run by Jacob Elkins, Tatabim, Chief Tatabim, the son of Wopeg-Wooit. So Wopeg-Wooit had a child, and he named him Tatabim. So Tato-Bim, T-A-T-O-B-E-M, Tatabim. He is the chief of the Long Island Pequot. So the chief of the Pequot, in 1634, gets on the Dutch vessel to trade with these Dutch traders. They set up a House of Good Hope. They're here to trade. They're trading with Nipmuc and the Matabasic. And Jacob Elkins, for whatever fucking reason, captures Chief Tatabim. Chief Tatabim goes on board on the ship, says, let's trade, and this Jacob Jacques Elkins captures Tatabim. He kidnaps him, and he says, you're mine. I've captured you now. So Jacob Elkins captures Pequot Chief Sachem Tatabim, and he demands ransom. And he says, I'll give you back your chief if you give me some money or something. I guess apparently he wanted beaver pelts. The Beaver Wars. So it was all about the fucking beaver. Isn't it always about the goddamn beaver? And then that's the life story of man anyways. So Long Island Pequot brought him a bushel of the bushels, 140 fathoms, however many that is, of wampum. They're like, you want some fucking money? Here's bushels of wampum. And, you know, everybody was using it as currency, so that was money. They paid for Tatabim's release. But Jacob Jacques Elkins didn't give a shit. He took the wampum. Oh, thank you for these beads. Or whatever the fuck it is. Shells. Little tiny shells. Shell beads. But he was like, I don't want no fucking shell beads. I want some beaver. And he killed Tatabim. He murdered him. The CEO of the Dutch West India Company assassinates, kills, murders Chief Tatabim of the Pequot. The chief, their head, their leader, their president, their prime minister, their dictator, their leader. And the reason he went on there was just to trade peacefully, but Jacob Elkins, being the savage that he is, took all that trust that Tatabim had for him and abused it and said, fuck it, I got you now. And he got all that wampum, he accepted all that wampum, he killed Tatabim anyways. And that's all the Pequot got. So they paid him, right? They paid him 140, imagine that. Going out there, your fucking chief is captured, you pay the damn ransom, and they kill the fucking guy anyways. That's the Dutch. That's what the Dutch just did to the leader of the Pequot in 1634, 3 years before the table knife was invented. So Jacques Elkins is a piece of shit. He kills Tatabim anyways near Hartford, the capital of the Pequot village. They killed the chief in the capital, in their capital city, in the capital place where they lived, or near the capital. So now the Pequot are in disarray. What are we going to do now? So they elect Sassacus. They said Sassacus is going to be our chief. And this actually pisses off Uncas. But for right now, Sassacus becomes the Pequot's main sachem, the main chief. So Sassacus is the successor. But unfortunately, because of that divide, Uncas is going to take some of the Pequot away, and he's going to name them the Mohegan. So the Mohicans, the Mohegan, are actually enemies of the Pequot. But at first, they used to be the same tribe. Uncas and Sassacus were part of Pequot when Tadabum died. So this is 3 years before the year of the table knife. Now, 1634, something else happened. Captain John Stone was killed by the Western Neantics. So 1634, this is 3 years before the massacre of Mystic River, which is what all this is about. So 3 years, you have the Dutch out there, you got the British, and then you've got the Pequot, and you got some of the Western Neantics, you got Nipmucks, you got Metabasics. So you have lots of tribes, 4 or 5, probably more Native American tribes than the Dutch and the English, which I hate using that term. That's the language they were speaking, but they were company men, and they were, British. They were from fucking England, coming over here, trying to make money, and then ship it back to, so, Sassacus. Remember Sassacus, okay? So Sassacus is going to be the last of the Pequot, and he's the one who picks up the tomahawk after Tadabum drops it. So Chief Tadabum is no longer the chief of the Pequot, now it's Chief Sassacus. So 1634, the Western Neantic killed John Stone, but the Pequot is going to get the blame, but it was the Western Neantics that did it. So Stone apparently is a piece of shit anyways. He's abducting and he's robbing, he's stealing, he's a pirate. He got kicked out of Boston, he got kicked out, the Puritans condemned him for being a blasphemer, but then also for a bunch of shit. So John Stone, he's a slave trader, he's a pirate, he's a thief, he's got connections or something in London. But he went around after he gets banished from Boston for lewd and immoral conduct, whatever that might be. John Stone stops at the mouth of the Connecticut River on the way to Virginia. And he wants to try to make some money. So he's going to capture himself some slaves. He captures Western Neantic women and children to sell as slaves in Jamestown, Virginia. Because that's what Virginia was doing. 1619 is when the first slave appeared in Virginia. 1619, this is 15 years later. So the Western Neantic women and children are captured. They are captured by John Stone, and so he's captured these slaves. He abducts 2 Western Neantic men, and they forced to show him up the way up the Connecticut River. So that's the first, I guess. I'm not for sure which one. Maybe the women and children and the men. Maybe he just captured the whole damn tribe. But as the 2 Western Neantic men were shown the way up the Connecticut River, he and his crew were suddenly attacked and killed by a larger group of Western Neantic. So the captured 2 Western Neantic men, as he was showing them where to go, they were fucking killed later on. So, and then people were happy. They were either indifferent or happy in Boston. They're like, oh my God, John Stone got killed. Oh, well, he was kidnapping them. He was abducting them. So it says here, Captain John Mason said that the killers were not native Pequods, but had frequent recourse unto them. John Winthrop said that all of them, John Mason, John Winthrop, John Underhill, it's like, fuck, can't you find John Stone? Can't you find your own first name? So John Winthrop says that the Pequot admitted killing John Stone and said that it was to free 2 of their own men whom Stone had bound and forcibly made to show him the way up the river. And then he with 2 others and the 2 Indians, their hands still bound, went on shore. 9 of their men watched them, and when they were on sleep in the night, they killed them. Then going towards the pinnace to have taken that, it suddenly blew up into the air. This was related with such confidence and gravity as, having no means to contradict it, we incline to believe it. So then going towards the pinnace to have taken that, it suddenly blew up into the, I don't know what they're talking about, but essentially they're saying when they're sleeping, they kill them. When they're sleeping, they killed them. When they were on sleep in the night, and then it says, then going towards the pinnace to have taken that, it suddenly blew up into the air. This is actually their words, right? So John Winthrop, God, can't you fucking write better? So anyways, Essentially, they said that they believed that the two men were captured. They believed that story. But there's a whole bunch, they he captured Western Neantic women and children to sell them as slaves, and James